Welcome to PhD with Women on IT Hack the Future. My name is Beata Young, and today's PhD Positivity Hacks delivered will be by our guest Anne Lebreton-Wolf. Topic: Early Stage Investing 101. What you need to know. Episode 132 starts here. Let me remind you, this is a grassroots community that focuses on women on IT, an inclusive forum of women in technology, startups, and female leaders who are supported by men as well. And I bring heart to that hustle because empathy is my motto. And empathy is critical when you're at the early stage of investing. First, let me mention some of the things that's been happening in the world of technology. Exciting news to the poet laureate Ada Limon. Her poem In Praise of Mystery, a poem for Europa, made for NASA, is launching into space on October 10th, set to orbit Jupiter by 2030. May it inspire across galaxies, shining among the stars. Another mention is Peter Bombaci, former PhD guest. Round of applause to Pete Bombaci, founder of GenWell Project and our former PhD guest, for his successful forums and workshops across Canada, spreading the power of human connection. May you continue to inspire more people, Pete. Congratulations to co-founder of Outsera, Inez Ismail, for being recognized as one of the 50 leading women in startups and tech in the UK, but Tech Round. Keep shining, Inez. Now let's go back to our topic, Early Stage Investing 101. We'll discover what we need to know. Early stage investment offers the chance to be at the forefront of innovation, supporting groundbreaking startups and potentially reaping significant rewards. In this episode, we'll be joined by the business angel and innovation expert, Anne, founder of ALW Finance and Innovation. Anne brings a wealth of experience to the table, having served as a private investor in French and European tech startups since 2012, focusing on PreSeed, Seed, Series A stages. Her passion extends beyond finances as a co-founder of Good Only Ventures, specializing in sea life and maritime investments. And let's start with a simple question. Where in the world are you today?
Thank you, Beata, and hello, everyone. So, as you may see in the back, I'm sitting in Paris in my office. It's not yet springtime, but there's a lot of good news ahead.
Oh, a lot of good news ahead. I guess it's good news you could share with us. What is your good news, Anne?
Well, from an individual perspective, there's an exit that is going on in my portfolio and something quite positive. So that make me stand out of my bed this morning with a smile. And from a more general perspective, although there are many challenging geopolitical issues now that can be worrying and that have not yet been fixed and that are not easy to fix anyhow, there are some quick evolving technologies. And regarding AI, it opens up a new universe of possibility. There's also in space tech some opportunities. And in general, if you just look at the nature outside, although we have a lot to do to improve the footprint of humanity on nature, still there are some blooms that are starting to develop, to grow, to expand as springtime is coming here. So that's good news also.
Absolutely. And the good news is we have Anne today to share her knowledge with us. So, Anne, let me start with the question: what motivates you to engage in early stage investment as a business angel?
Well, it's first a story of men and women who have a positive view about the future, who want to do something to concretize, to materialize one idea and to push it into society. They have impact or financial, or both of them goals, objectives. But I think being in entrepreneurship somehow, I am an entrepreneur myself, and I also fund entrepreneurial adventures. Well, that's something that puts you somehow in the future. You have to assess the possibilities, the opportunities, and I think early stage investing is all about that. It's all about the willingness to transform, to bring your own, even if small, contribution to the world, to make it a little bit better, and to modernize, to transform things. And that's, I think, what early stage is about for me.
Excellent. We have a comment from Jane saying, "Hello, Beata and Anne. Looking forward to listen to this episode. I'm looking forward to having your questions, Jane. But let's go to some questions I prepared myself. Can you share your approach to identifying promising startups at their early stage? Because you mentioned nature, you mentioned so many things, but how do you keep your focus on?
Well, my focus is first on the people. I have to have a good match. Some prominent business angels say they have to be willing to take a coffee with the founders, and I would say the same. It's a little bit like a marriage, or at least some kind of partnership. You are sitting there for 3, 5, 7, 10 years, so you have to have a good match. You have to trust in the founders, and you have to feel that they sometimes will have the push, will have the guts to move forward, even when difficulties are upcoming. And so I really look for this type of people, whether male or female, that really have the willingness to push it forward and to drive the adventure on a long-term period. Now, that's for the people, and I think it's firstly and by far a story of people. And then I look for technology. For me, but that's my own focus. There have been so many success with low tech startups, but my focus is mostly on deep tech or high tech startups, such as photonics, such as 3D printing, such as robotics. I also invested in metaverse, spatial cloud solution, spatial computing solutions, space tech, etc. So I also look for some differentiating technology that can be promising, but that's not only in the lab, that have practical use cases that can bring economical value to the startup. Otherwise, I think it's not really suitable for business angels to fund such startups. They should look for some other funding sources.
And how do you typically become involved with the startups you choose to invest? Is it through meetings, or is it you're looking for events that are specifically aimed at investment opportunities?
It really varies. I think I have had quite a lot of cases where the introduction point was. Some friends have connected me with founders saying, you should really look at this startup. Often through fairs and events and Grand Prix prizes, there are some startups that are able to pitch, to come to the forefront, and then you can see how they behave, how much confidence they put in their project, and how much will and thrust they put in their pitch. And so that's already quite a good way to filter them. But also I receive hundreds of pitch decks in my email and in my mailbox, or get connected through LinkedIn. So really, if I had one advice on this, be differentiating. Do not offend me, but just be differentiating, because I receive there are so many people looking for cash, looking for smart money, that you have to just really differentiate and go straight to the point also, because time is quite precious, and I don't have much.
So that's almost like a networking 101 from Anne Lebreton. Anne, I wonder, how did you start? How did you become an angel investor?
Well, the first thing was my husband was always away traveling for his work. So I had some spare time, also a little bit of spare cash. And then I attended an alumni meeting with some prominent business angel. But in 2012 in France, it wasn't so popular. There were some, but it was really nascent. And so those people were really impressive. There were men and a woman, and they really shared their passion for supporting entrepreneurship, having been entrepreneurs themselves. And it was really fascinating for me. I had the impression to discover a brand new world while having worked in the financial sector for 15 years. I thought, well, that's really what finance is about. It's injecting money in projects and taking some kind of risk and hoping for some gains to re-inject later on. And so it was really fascinating for me because of those role models, but also because it just put some kind of real meaning to the activity I had been doing in my professional life, but more from a routine perspective. And now I really had the feeling I got the essence of what finance is about. And so really I started straight ahead to the first deal. It wasn't the best one in terms of returns, but I met with really fascinating people, really experienced, and I think they let me in, and they it was quite a precious on-site training to go on and to move forward. I had also some chance, some luck, because you have to have also at some point in life. And my second investment was really successful. So that really triggered what happened next.
Tell us the story about your second investment. That sounds fascinating. What was the startup?
Well, the startup was about services, non-medical services, but for hospital and clinics. And it was bringing to patients all they need, but that is not related to medical care. So you can order hairdressing, you can order food, you can order flowers, you can order some kind of a massage, etc. Because when you're in hospital, I haven't been that often, but still have been, and you just rely on your close family to help you for what's non-medical. And there you had a solution just to provide you with those services and goods that you need, or that makes your stay at hospital a little bit less painful. And so they really managed to scale up. And that was a success, with BAs exiting to a huge international VC fund.
And what do you think was the success there? Was it the unique idea, or was it the tenacity of founders? What was the main factor you believe that benefited them?
I think the three co-founders really believed in what they were building. They had a solid network and a very good advisory board. One person from McKinsey was really involved and was really, really, I think, helping them. And I think they also addressed it in a pragmatic way. And that's one thing too, is how much of reality you are taking into account, because there are a lot of founders that are kind of dreamers or project themselves in a 10-year horizon, but you have to make the startup work from the very beginning. And the longer it takes to bring in some cash and some real economic deployment, the more you burn cash, and that's really a problem. So I think what made them successful is that they were really pragmatic and deploying quite rapidly to have real life experience, to be able to improve their solution. They had really good advisors. I wasn't sitting there, so I can tell it's from the outside. And also to have a go-to-market strategy that was efficient. I think those were the three, and they were aligned together. That's also something I should mention.
Excellent. Cooperation is key. Could you highlight some key lessons or insight you've gained from your early stage investments?
The first one would be again quite pragmatic. It takes longer and more money than what is mentioned in the business plans. I have had one or two that were up and in advance of their business plan, but more often you are lagging behind because it takes more time to implement, more time to convince your first customers, more time to hire the people you need, etc. So one thing is be prepared for rather a marathon than a 100-meter race. And also, the thing is that you hope for the best, but the best can come early or later on. So just really my advice would be pragmatic. Be pragmatic and just regularly check that you align with reality, that you are not kind of in a dream, but that's your solution, your the way you position also your product or services fits with reality.
Excellent. You may hope for the best, but the best may come late or may never come, right? And tell us about your investment that didn't succeed.
I have had some, and as a business angel, just be prepared to have more failures than successes. But if you have some bright successes, they will offset the well, failure is negative, but the startups that at least did not succeed. So I have had some bankruptcies or some startups just not being able to deliver the product or not able to gain sufficient market traction to make it successful. And at some point, you cannot inject cash indefinitely. So you have to stop the adventure. So there have been I would say it's hard for a woman to say that, but female entrepreneurship from this perspective, at least in my portfolio, has been less successful. So I would advocate for balanced teams. I think it's really valuable to have a male point of view and a female point of view in the management of a company, I think, even in the early stage phase. And at some point as well, regarding the failures, most failures I've experienced were that there were no or not sufficient commercial sales and marketing skills in the management of the company, in the co-founding team. Too much of research people, too much of design creation people. But I think to be successful, you really need to sell. And to sell, you really need to have a guy or a girl that knows how to sell, that knows how to talk to a customer, how to transform, to convert, how not to have a churn rate that is too high. So commercial skills and marketing skills, for me, even in deep tech companies, are as important as real deep tech R&D skills for it to succeed, I think.
Which comes back to diversity management, which is the more diverse diversity of thought, actually not so much of what color skin or what gender you're representing. It's diverse thoughts and that come in a very open discussion can change a lot. Now we have a couple of questions. Let's go to Olga Vasina, who is asking, interesting conversation. Anne, do you have specific metrics on investing in terms of valuation? Or indeed, what do you see as the base for, say, startup valuations currently?
Well, regarding metrics, usually valuations are done by comparables or by EBITDA multiples. But for startups, it's really tough because it depends on what's your activity. I do not value much of click or pages that were seen, but for me, it's really comparables. What other companies or startups in the same sector are doing, are achieving, and how advanced are you, and I would say I would take into account market traction, so sales, revenues, churn, etc., as one of the key metric to value your startup, but really depends on the type of startup. So there's no plain and vanilla recipe for that. And it also depends on the maturity stage. At pre-seed, you will not look at the same metrics as you would for Series B, for instance. What I also look at is in terms of metrics, so sales, really market traction, that's something, but also on the diversity of customers, or at least diversity on potential commercial pipeline. If you only do quite good revenues, but with one single customer, that's something that would really be a little bit negative for me, because you have quite a huge risk, and I would value being able to address diverse customers. That would make a plus on the valuation side. Now, also, one thing I really consider now, having been doing that for 12 years, is your cash runway, your ability to manage cash. The thing is not to sit on a huge bank account, but the thing is not to run out of cash, because if you have to fundraise or to bridge in a dire straight position, that always pushes the valuation down, and can even make your company go bankrupt quite rapidly. So cash management is something really I've been looking more and more to. So now, startup valuation. Now, there is this Argos V2 index for non-listed companies, SMEs in the EU. You can have a look at it. And the index is close to 8.5 now, and 8.5x EBITDA multiple. But I think you have some models to value startups, and VC funds have some proper or own models to evaluate startups. But for me, it's investing very early stage, so pre-seed, seed rounds mostly. You cannot run a proper mathematical model to value the startup. So it's a kind of guess. You try to make it as explainable and as rational as possible, but it's still a kind of guess, because at this stage you do not know how it will evolve. Some companies will even pivot, and then really building your model on some metrics that will no longer be relevant afterwards. It's quite tricky.
Right, it was going deep into details. I hope Olga will be happy with the answer. We have a question from Jane. What investor need or should do to understand before investing?
So it's a little bit different. What we need is to have a transparent view and to build trust. So if somehow you feel that you're getting cheated upon, that's something that's closes the deal, let's say, closes it in a bad way. So what we need is trust, some kind of transparency about the issues, because at some point you know that everything is not rosy. We're not living in a teddy bear world, and so you have to be honest with the pluses and the minuses, and then to have an open-minded discussion about what can be fixed, what's the trajectory of the company. And so investors really need, after a first pitch, of course, to have a clear view on the situation. So practically what we need financial forecasts, we need the bank account statements, we also need a balance sheet, we also need the founders to have put some own money into the company. That's really something I also care about skin in the game, and to have alignment on the risk you are taking, because you take a different risk with your own money than with the money coming from others. And so what the need that's I would say what I need. I do not really look into IP registration, etc., but I also look at a demo of the product to see whether it's really working. And I always value that there is some feedback from a potential customer or an existing customer to see that it works and that it has a proper use case that can be illustrated by someone else.
Excellent. Thank you, Jane, for your question. Olga is setting a follow-up question on the discussion about startup valuations. Okay, so essentially a startup valuation is guesswork. Is there a baseline example in US? I think circa 12 to 15 million US for tech startup right now.
Okay, but really there is a big point, because there is a trend, let's say in some Eastern European countries, but not only there, to align on US metrics. Okay, fine. If you can pitch to US investors and you gather a bunch of them that are willing to fund your funding round, that's okay, super for you. The valuations will be quite high, you'll get little diluted, and that's perfect. Now, if you want to attract European investors, they are not sitting on the same metrics. And for me, I have been quite impressed, let's say, but also it raises some doubts when reaching out to me with US metrics for a company that is not US based. Because when you are US based, you reach out to a 400 million unified or quite unified customer market. It depends whether you're on B2B or B2C, but it's quite a unified market you're addressing, and you're already there. Now, when you come from abroad, from another country, and you apply US metrics, but with your domestic market being a 5 million B2C customer pool, or being a mid-industrialized B2B country, and you come up with US valuations, then I think for me there's a kind of discrepancy. So yes, you can align on US metrics if you have a product or a service that is going worldwide from the very beginning, and that you want to target US investors, and you have some worldwide differentiating or competitive advantage. But just be careful about that. If you do not have all those characteristics to make your startup worldwide from the very beginning, and being able to address and to target and to compete with international competitors, then applying a US valuation to a domestic or a regional startup is some kind of a danger, because I've experienced it. They reached out to me saying, well, we want to fundraise on a 12, 15 million US valuation, but we are based here and there. We have 2 customers from our domestic market, but we are really great. And when you look up in PitchBook, Dealroom, or other databases, you see that there are 20 or 30 or 50 companies doing the same everywhere on the planet. And then you say, well, is it really worth 12 or 15 million? And that's something to take into account. Just to be, if you use US metrics, be able to compete with US competitors and be able to attract international investors. I think everyone wants his or her startup to get to a unicorn stage and keeping the majority, or at least quite a significant equity proportion. But you really have to have something that has an intrinsic value that can match with this goal or this dream.
Absolutely. We can all dream about Silicon Valley, but it's only in one location, even though there were some initiatives to join Silicon Valley to Europe, and then been countless travels back and forth. I think we still have to, in Europe has to still rely on the local market, but then it's a good test bed for any startup idea, because it's you can burn cash with less risk. Now, Anne, Let's go back to the investment and risk. How do you assess and manage the risk associated with early stage investment? You've mentioned some startups failed. Um, how do you know whether the success rate is higher or lower with certain startups?
Well, the first thing is only allocate cash to early stage investment that you do not want to lose, but you could afford to lose, because you cannot take it's a risky asset class. So you cannot make it as the main portion of your wealth. Otherwise, it's really a risky asset composition, and you never know the liquidity that is connected to your startup investments. With some, they promised me with the hand on their hearts, in 3 years you will have an exit, you will get your cash back with some financial gains, and 10 years afterwards, I'm still sitting there. So just, be really conscious about the fact that it's a long-term investment in general. It's not, it's, there is a reason why most VC funds have an 8 to 10 year investment horizon, right, for the LPs. So it's that of course, they invest, and then there's this running phase and then this investment phase, but somehow you are kind of stuck in the secondary market, except for some very specific market, but is quite illiquid. So you cannot hope for much of a liquidity on your shares once you have invested. Of course, you can have them buy out by the founders or by some other investors looking to increase their position, but it's not often the case, or at least it has not been very often for me. So be conscious that it is the money you can lose. You wish for the best, but you can lose. And you can lose first 5 or 6 times, and then the second one will be a very positive exit. It can happen this way. So be prepared to be patient. That's one take. And now, regarding risk, the toughest thing is that you have identified some risk at the very beginning, but the biggest risk that occurs in year 3, year 5. And it can be between the founders who get disaligned, who have different views on the strategy. What is the most, let's say, disappointing is that when it's working, but the founders get some kind of quarrel because they do not view the expansion strategy in the same way. So that can happen. Of course, when times are getting difficult and tough, there can also be some big risks occurring or challenges. One of the founders leaving, or they need cash in an extremely short period, and that had not been anticipated. Another risk is the commercial sales team. I have had some experience with startups that had a very good product, hired a senior sales person, and for whatever reason, this senior salesperson didn't deliver. It took him or her 6 months to sign the first contract. It costed quite a lot to the company. And then the company had a real risk, a real cash risk, while the product was de-risked, while everything was okay with the company, but it was just about sales. So I think there are some risks you can look at when due diligencing the company when investing, but there are also some risks that occur down the road, and about competition, about regulation, etc. And that's very hard to anticipate. Again, it's an investment. For me, I haven't done the math so far, but I think it would be an average of a 6-year period on which, when you invest in pre-seed round, you sit on the cap table of the company as an early stage BA. So over 6 years, there are so many things that are happening. Just recall over the last 6 years, COVID in 2018, no one was talking about COVID. The interest rates were very low all around the world. There wasn't the war in Ukraine. There wasn't the war in Palestine as well. So a lot of things have been changing since then. And so companies have to adapt. And whoever knows what will happen in the next 6 years. So there are many risks that you cannot forecast in the beginning.
Many risks you cannot forecast, many risks you may not be even able to see when they are happening. And we have got another risky question from Olga, who was challenging us about US valuation. Now, Olga is asking, do you think EU startups offer more upside, or is it because you are based in the EU that you invest there? Thanks for the insights, Anne.
All right. I start usually, and I didn't have a different approach from others. BA, when you invest in very early stage startup, it's easier for you to invest in your domestic market, or at least in a regional area where the due diligences are made easier, where you understand also the law and the regulation the startups are facing, and also you can somehow in your network have some other insights, know more about competition, etc. I think there are very good companies in the US that are worth looking at, but for an EU investor, it's always more tricky because you bear the exchange rate risk as well, and then there are some issues about the IRS, the American Fiscal Administration. And so I would say it's a level of complexity that is a little bit higher to invest really abroad. And there is also one thing, is that if you have to defend your rights, I'm not saying that you cannot defend them in the US, but if you have to hire international lawyers, that costs you a lot. So you may lose quite of your financial profits paying for legal counsels or legal attorneys to just have your rights defended. And that's also something that I really care about. And so I'm not someone going to court easily, but at some point in time, if the other party knows you cannot defend yourself, that's a big issue. So I think that's the main reason why I've stayed EU centered. And I would say there are many more startups I would be willing to invest in than the money I have. So I still have quite a lot of games in my playground here. But of course, I do not disregard startups that are based in Canada, in the US, or in Singapore. There are some very good and interesting deals. But again, the valuations are quite high. So I really have to be convinced that it's really a world-class startup, and that all the admin, legal, gray zone in terms of understanding from my side have to be offset by a really good scale-up potential by the startup.
And of course, you need to deliver a very clear pitch deck, as Anne mentioned before. Now, Olga is asking on a different note, do you like Me Too investing, aka following a second player into a market, or do you like investing in startups which are moving into clear blue water of opportunity?
Okay, so investing in a challenger can be interesting because there is already one that has been paving the way. But I would advocate and go for disruption. So really blue ocean startups, which can demonstrate that they understand where they are going to and how they will address the market. Because if you are disrupting the thing, you have to be able to convince customers to switch and to transition from existing solution to yours. So they really have to have this force, this strength to go for that. But I would advocate and I would go for new solutions rather than challenging a first runner.
Excellent. Now, you mentioned the cross-border investment. What advice do you have for business angels looking to engage in cross-border investments?
Right. So meet the founders personally. I would say I have discovered quite a lot of things, and I'm not a psychologist, but just meeting the people, taking a coffee with them. So if you really want to do cross-border investments, go and meet the people. Go and meet people there. Where you will see, well, it depends whether you invest in B2B or B2C, but just meet with the people who would be the customers. Just try to grasp a little of the mood of the ecosystem there before just putting your money on the table and saying, I go with you. I always try to talk with some other peoples that are willing to, or that already sit on the cap table, to see what their feelings are, what their reasons are for putting money in the company. And I think that's really valuable because you get another point of view than the one you have. And you also get a feeling. You can cross-check whether it's some kind of serious matter, or if it's just a startup that is a fake one as well. And you can really feel the distance between the product or the service the startup is building and the use case in the market. And I think for cross-border investment, I really go to see them and really check with other people that know the regulation there, that have already been doing investments in this country, to see whether it's too much of a distance for me, or if it is achievable, and if I can have my place on the cap table as well.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Anne. Now, let's go back to the fact you were mentioning in our discussion before the show about the smart money. Can you elaborate on the concept and in the context of angel investing?
Yes, it's becoming more and more popular to onboard angel investors that not only invest their money, but that also can have can help the startup with their own network or with their own competencies. So it's a kind of tricky balance between helping and not being too intrusive, and also managing your agenda. So you will hear about smart money quite often. Now, as money is being scarcer and scarcer in the early stage rounds, the founders are looking for smart money, but also accepting passive investments as they need the cash. But they are looking for smart money because if you are pragmatic, what does it mean? It means that you are not paying a consultant. You are through the investment of the BA, you are aligning your interests, and the BA will deliver some kind of advice, some kind of network opening, etc., for free, because your interests are aligned. He or she will win, and you will win as well. So smart money is about getting money invested in your company, but it's also getting advice and network for free. That's quite fair. Now, the thing is that this smart money, you have to look for investors that I think it's a kind, again, of marriage. The two parties choose themselves. So you have to, as a business angel, to make yourself attractive enough, but in an honest way, not overselling what you can deliver. And on the other side, you have to be pragmatic from the startup perspective, that you cannot ask too much from your investors because they also have other activities. So it's just kind of finding the right balance with cash plus advice network, but in a reasonable framework, or in a reasonable balance between all that, to get it, but not to be asking too much that the BA cannot pledge on the long run. Again, I really insist on that. It's a 5 to 7 to 8 years a common adventure, and then you have to be able to keep up your promises on both sides over this long range period.
Now, Anne, thank you so much. We are heading towards the end of our show. We had quite a lot of questions. I'll mention them later on. Early stage investing is like attempting to navigate a maze blindfolded with a map drawn by a toddler, as Jane Smith says. And I wanted to ask you, as a toddler, how do you navigate? How do you gain your knowledge to be on top of the industry trends?
I think you mentioned toddlers and kids. And what's fascinating with kids and toddlers is that they want to explore the world. And now some years have passed, but I think as a business angel or as an investor, you have to keep this curiosity and this motivation to learn. Each day I learn a lot. And I'm thinking and saying to myself, what? You didn't know about that? You didn't know about this competitor, about this technology? And there are still a lot of gray zones where I know nothing or quite nothing about. But you have to have this curiosity that the children have and this creativity to be able to imagine, to project yourself what the solution could be to this problem. How the way some startups address this pain point could be transformed or could be disrupted. And I think for angel investing, you really have to have some part of yourself that is rational, that really analyzes the documents you have, the financial plans, etc. But you also have to have kind of creativity, dream, and this spirit of willingness to try something and to create. And I think the combination of both is really important. But of course, it's navigating in a sea where you are just blindfolded because no one knows. I have no crystal ball, and I've never met someone with one that was working. What will be the future in 5 to 6 years' time? You can have some guesses, but I think most of them will be wrong. It's just very, very, very hard to guess what tomorrow will be. So let's project yourself in some years from now. It's really a little bit like weather forecasts. You can see whether it will be raining in 1 hour, but a 10-day weather forecast is mostly wrong.
Absolutely. And I can quote somebody who said the trouble with weather forecasting is that it's too wrong for us to ignore it, but then it's too stupid of us to rely on it all the time. Now, I, Esmeralda says, love listening to Anne, very informative. Agree with you. And Olga, thank you on disruption. Schumpeter knows best. Absolutely. The idea of disruption brought to us by Schumpeter. Now, Anne, as we are heading towards the end, tell us what is the new exciting project you're working at the moment?
All right. So I am still scouting and due diligence startups for private investments. So for the time being, I'm looking at some of them, looking into space tech, looking also at some smart grid management for industrials. I am also looking for submarine solutions to screen the bottom of the sea. So there are quite a lot of projects I'm screening now, but my other activity is about innovation policies and the Good Only Venture fund I co-founded with other founders, and we are really deploying the first investments and doing the second closing round. So quite a busy agenda on this part. As mentioned by Beata, I'm focusing on blue and maritime tech and attending quite a lot of conferences and doing quite a lot of startup search and scouting in this area.
In investing, what is comfortable is rarely profitable, Robert Arnold said. Now, Anne, I wanted to ask you about the number one book you wish you read it before you started your career as an investor.
It wouldn't be a financial one, although there are very, very good ones about testimonies of Warren Buffett and some others. But I've read when I was, well, let's say 27 or 28, a book by Jean d'Ormesson, which is a French writer, famous here, who was writing about his family story, a little bit of a saga that a little bit like Downtown Abbey, but it was not the same. And it gives you a perspective on a long-term basis. It's the history of an aristocratic family over 100 years, from the 19th century to the 70s. And you see how time passes. It gives you a little bit of perspective on the long term and the way you can take a step to the right or to the left just to consider life and to kind of be always curious about the future, to trust that some good things will happen, but also to be reactive when you have to be aligned with yourself, and also to be able to look at it from a higher perspective. And I think that's something that is also valuable in business angel investing and maybe in life in general, is that to act, to consider the short term, but also to take some distance, some step aside, to see in which direction you are going, and how could the future be, always keeping an optimistic view, because I think it's what you get the most out of life if you look at life in a positive way.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing your great book recommendation. We have author of the original quotation. Thank you, Patrick Young, for saying, correcting me. The trouble with weather forecasting is that it's right too often for us to ignore it and wrong too often for us to rely on it. We can probably tweak it in terms of investment, right? The trouble with investment forecasting, that it's right too often for us to ignore it and wrong too often for us to rely on it. And knowledge that you build over the years, Anne, are you planning to share it with with somebody in the future, write your own book?
Maybe. I have been doing some interviews like this one today, and for the time being, I want to build a little bit more of my track record, to be in, to be well, to gain a little bit more experience, meet with numerous people, experience some other things, and maybe later on write my own book. But it's not at the top of the agenda, although of course it could be something interesting. But maybe when I have some more spare time, yes.
There you go. We can quote another great quotation, which is, "If you think you're ready, you're ready. If you don't think you're ready, you're not ready." So, Anne, the time is probably now. Maybe I hope our discussion will inspire you to write a book, especially given the fact that AI can help you build a book. Now, let's go to the life lesson quote. Anne, what is your favorite life lesson quote and how did it change you?
I would go again with nature. I think there is this French painter, Henri Matisse, who said that there are blooms everywhere for whoever wants to see them. And I think it can sound a little bit naive when you just read it, but I think it's a real life lesson, is that you have to find the opportunities yourself and consider them in a positive way. And I think that's something very interesting. Even in your darkest days, there are some way to exploit the situation for the better, hope for the better, and act. And I would also say, to quote Simon Sinek, he started with start with why. And if I may just modify this sentence, I would say just start. Start with doing something. Start with just writing something on a blank page. But do something that transforms your idea into real life. And I think that's the basis to build something more evolved upon. But you have started. You have transformed something, even if it's very small, but you have put some optimism and some transformation power in what you are doing. And that's, I think, what would be the lesson for my life.
Well, it comes only for me to say that our positivity quote comes from positive thinking only and goes look for something positive in each day, even if some days you have to look a little harder. Now, and I like to quote Eleanor Roosevelt, who said, "Women are like tea bags. We don't know our true strength until we are put in hot water." So, in life, how are you brewing, Anne? How are you in hot water?
Well, that's a good question. I try to keep my self control because I think everyone has emotions. It gives some colors to life, but sometimes when you react on emotions, you regret it afterwards because you were too extreme in one way or another. So I think I would really say that in hot water, I think I have a first reaction of swimming, and then just to take a step aside and say, well, cool down and just think about it, take a cup of tea or a glass of water, and then just give yourself a breath and let's go on. But of course, there are sometimes that are more difficult than others, like for
Mm.
everyone. But I
Oh,
try to get the best out of that.
oh, absolutely. And I thought that you are going to say, because I can't imagine this lovely voice of yours would deliver anything other than a sweet chamomile tea with a bit of French honey. Now, let's imagine that you could meet anyone in the world for a private breakfast. Who would it be, and where would you choose to meet? Share your pick and the reason why.
All right. So I would say I would love to sit on a table with Sam Altman because I think his 7 trillion project is really intriguing. And I think there's a lot to be done about AI. And I would really have to love to have his insights on that. And I would also love to discuss with Volodymyr Zelensky uh, in whichever place. I don't care. It's just to have an open conversation, to be able to share thoughts. And both of them, I think, have a transformative view. Of course, it's not easy, and reality is tough. But really, people that have a vision that are right on some points, maybe wrong on some others, but just how they challenge themselves, how they challenge the world, I think that would be very inspiring for me and instructive, I think. Now, for the place, well, wherever it's convenient to discuss, to have an open conversation, and just be able to reflect upon the conversation. Yes.
Well, I know a lot of beautiful places in Paris. I'm sure you could pick some beautiful place in your beautiful location. We've got a comment from Olga Mala who says, "Thank you, Anne. Always good advice." Thank you, Olga, for making a comment. Now, Anne, as we are heading towards the end, I am grateful for you sharing your knowledge with us. Opportunities come infrequently. When it rains gold, put out the bucket, not the thimble, Warren Buffett says. And that's it from episode 132 of the PhD live stream. Thank you very much, Anne, for staying with us. And our viewers, to stay updated, we encourage you to subscribe to our LinkedIn or our YouTube and Facebook feeds to never miss another live stream. Next week, we are going to join on Wednesday as usual. And thank you very much to our lovely audience Olga Vasina, I Esmeralda, Jane, and Olga Mala, as well as Patrick Young. As always, our positivity quote comes also from Maya Angelou, who says, "If you don't like something, change it. If you can't change it, change your attitude." Today is your day to hug the future, hug the positivity you want. Thank you.